Nice to meet all of you. My name's Garrett. I was a very early employee at a company called Unify, which I'm sure many of you are aware of. I was number 9 there. And today we're going to talk about how I believe, and I think a lot of people here are starting to swing this way, that sales enablement, the future of it is going to be bespoke. And so just like very quick plug, and very interesting data point, I put together a list of a bunch of go-to-market engineers from around the world. We collected answers from 250 of them and allowed us to really crunch really good data on go-to-market engineering and what the function means, what tools people use, what they're being paid, what agencies charge, the good, the bad, the ugly, and much more in this report. If you want to check it out, this is the link. Super informative, and it's honestly like a really beautiful work of art that I'm really proud to be able to share that with the world. There were a few really interesting things that we can take away from this report other than like, what should I be paid or what should I expect to pay an agency? And these were my most frustrating ones. One was 45% of companies actually know what go-to-market engineers do. That's like pretty bad. A lot of people here said they know what SDRs do when one of the gentlemen asked for the people to respond, but 45% of people actually knowing is pretty poor. And one of the top frustrations is that most of the tools that we use are poorly integrated, hard to use, poor support, and yet somehow we report to everyone. So we report to everyone, no one knows what we do, and now we're frustrated by the closed wall gardens that exist, and the questions that we have are, how can we build something better? And two final ones. The top bottlenecks are bandwidth and capacity. There are people, I'm now, and I'm sure like Ben and other people are losing sleep over how much they feel like they can do with Claude Code. It is crazy to me to feel that like sense of anxiety, and also just how much you can do across workflows. And so just leaving the link there again if you want to go read it. But growth has become this painful cycle of like discovering go-to-market alpha and then everyone else copying it, and it's like no longer worthwhile. And I think like it's funny, certainly, but it's also like the nature of everything. And I think that like software as a concept, like many things are meant to be commoditized so others can benefit from it. But in a way, it does become less useful to every individual person that uses Clay, that uses Unify, that uses all of these things. And at the same time, the sales space is overflowing. I just typed in like sales VC market map, and I was like, this is too many companies like on one slide. So we have a lot of incredible teams that are building great products, but the question is like, how much of this is really useful to every team? How many of these tools on this chart have you used, tried, churned, etc.? And so this is what leads me to believe that cookie cutter go-to-market no longer works. We're trying to fit round pegs in square holes, and this is like no coincidence that this is happening, because when you buy commoditized software around some strategy that hundreds of other people are using, things are bound to become outdated. And so where I like to start is, and this is like where I bring my agency into the fold, is what can we bring and build around your company and what makes your team excited to go to work? And I think this is a lot of what people have covered. But this is a copy paste of like my go-to-market engineering engagement of like the things that I will build for you. And I have to do it so that people know what they're paying for, and it's like in a legal contract and they sign it in a DocuSign. But like all of those things are pretty like boring and monotonous, but like important exercises, except for the last one, which for me is like, we can build the outbound system, we can do the TAM scoring, we can do all that stuff that is really important. But the fun for me comes when I get to sit in the room with a team of BDRs that feel like they're running up against walls constantly and trying to hit their numbers, and we can build them something that like lands them a meeting booked with like a huge Fortune 500 company. That to me, like, I like helping others. That's like really exciting. And they certainly appreciate you too. So in the same way you don't want to compete with BDRs, if you empower them to be even better and get paid more themselves, they'll be your biggest fan. So what does that mean? That means you have to engage in like experimentation culture. And Unify certainly like taught me a bunch about this, but you need to focus a lot on like experimentation culture and what it takes to get really good at figuring out what you should spend your time on and what that will yield. And so that means sitting in the mud with the team and saying, what teams do I want to enable? What problems do they face? What systems do they use? What integrations do they have available to them? What data do they use? And what does a solution need to look like that will actually get strong adoption and usage? And thankfully, at least for me, for the very first time in my life, like Claude Code, instead of me needing to figure out how to write basic Python scripts, despite having a computer science degree from Duke, I feel like a lot more enabled to go build really cool stuff. So I'm actually going to do a demo, and I'm flying through this a little bit faster than I think I was expecting to, which isn't crazy surprising. But one of my clients that I work with is Antimetal. They're like a AI SRE to help teams get to the bottom of outages by connecting all of your logs and cool stuff. Definitely go check them out. Awesome engineering team as well. And their reps are spending way too much time literally doing the very simple thing that I think a lot of teams are doing, which is like trying to build lists of people and then like pulling their phone numbers and then putting it into the dialer. And it's pretty simple. Like I'm sure a lot of people know you can just like set up Clay with like a nice waterfall and then download a CSV and then upload it to Nooks or something like that. And so the first thing that I did when I started working with these businesses is like, let me just cut a list of all the various intent signals that you care about. I'll put it in CRM. And the thing that I learned about CRM, contrary to the last presenter in that debate on like who's a first-class citizen, is like for RevOps people, I think CRM is the first-class citizen. For everyone else, it feels like CRM is an afterthought. So I learned very quickly that the functionality of a CRM just like wasn't easy enough. It wasn't quick enough. Antimetal is actually using Attio, so they're also functioning with a product that has lesser integration capacity. And so for me, I really wanted to reduce prospecting overhead, spend more time on live conversations, and give them dials that weren't just like random lists that they were pulling from God knows where. So to jump into this, I'm gonna show you like their web app. And this is like a web app that I built. It's like obviously ugly, but I built like a bunch of cool color schemes and like silly stuff. But this is like what I live for. And so this is like a very simple web app that sits on top of Attio. We're pulling all of this into a Supabase instance that I couldn't tell you anything about because I'm not qualified to talk about it. But we're pulling pretty much their entire CRM and any company and person that has some type of intent signal associated with that entity into this product. And so by doing this, we can actually sort and filter all of these things. So here we can see companies, and we can look for companies where someone is being hired in infra capacity. And you can click into any one of these objects, see some information about it that we're pulling directly from the CRM, as well as what we're actually seeing. So in this case, we see that there's an infra hiring role, and we even see someone that was recently hired, and you can directly click into that. So on the company level, that's like kind of what we are doing. This is simulating obviously like a very simple CRM list, but at the people level, this is where it gets a little bit more interesting. So when you build in something like HubSpot or Attio, there's not a lot of enrichment that you can do within those platforms, and you typically have to ship it out. What I've allowed you to do is if we wanted to go down here and look at SRE personas, and we want to look at SRE personas that are new hires, we can filter for these things. Reps can hop in here, and we can basically click into any one of these people, and everyone cross their fingers for the demo gods. And we are using a data waterfall, thank God, that I've built behind the scenes to pull phone numbers. And what you can actually do is now download this list, and we'll enrich all the phone numbers. And in this case, Attio doesn't integrate with Nooks directly. So typically, this would be something that you would want to pipe in through HubSpot or elsewhere. But by pulling this phone number, we are sending that back to the CRM, which is really awesome. And we can also upload this list along with various intent signals directly to the Teams dialer. And so this gives them a great way to create lists. The second cool thing, and then I'll jump back to the slides super quickly, is we actually can give you, I'm kind of appalled that somehow no one has figured this out, and I might be like humored or humbled on this stage while speaking. But I've been really shocked to learn that so few platforms out there allow you to combine intent signals and prospecting like instantaneously. And so I was just like, obviously DeepLine is doing this and a bunch of other platforms are doing this in incredible ways, but I was just like, I should be able to have my list of intent signals for each company and then immediately prospect. And so this is a big problem if I see, if I'm looking at companies that recently had an outage. I'm gonna have to delete something here, but let's see. Demo gods, come on. So, for example, if we go to, I really wanted to do outage, but poop. So for job posting, for example, if we come across, let's go to HubSpot, I guess is a fun example. We can see that they have a number of job postings. They have this new hire, they have this competitor liker. This obviously could all be cleaned up. CEO, nice. I'm not emailing that person, but or CTO. But we actually can directly prospect for people within this interface. And so if I click this prospect button, we actually will run a just like very simple find people search behind the scenes. And I've been like shocked that there are not tools that do this of just like on demand versus a rep sees a signal, they go to Sales Nav or they go to Apollo, they need to plug the data in. That's like crazy to me. And so maybe people will have some suggestions, but this is at least what I've built. And so you can plug this job history in, pull this in, it will run a waterfall of data sources. You can do the same thing to get their phone numbers and emails. And then you ultimately have this tool that is allowing reps to move at a multiple of the speed that they were doing before. How are we on time? 2 more minutes. Okay, so that's like a quick demo of that. Hope that was cool to people. And then, yeah, I guess like a look into the future with like my last minute or two. A big exercise that I've spent a lot of time on across clients is needing to actually like score accounts, score people. That really important part of like figuring out how to prioritize accounts and create lists that are really informative. And so I found recruiting to be like a really interesting part of this equation, which is how can we find out who is the best job candidate for any given role based on industry, based on all of these things. And so I've been working with a recruiting agency to somewhat solve this problem. And so what used to take or what took this weekend a few days of like building 7, 8 different tables, I've begun to see where products like DeepLine and Claude Code can plug in and really abstract away a lot of the cyclical and repetitive steps of determining how to find people, determining how to qualify those people, determining how to score those people, and ultimately doing this in a much more conversational command line interface way. And so I was really, really impressed to see a workflow that takes days come down to simply like 20, 30 minutes. And so this is a terrible picture, but it's supposed to be a picture of a bunch of job candidates that I was looking at for from like random data that I was pulling using DeepLine, and the scoring that this would have taken me hours to set up in Clay with all of the score row, enriched data, et cetera. So I think all to say, the future for go-to-market is coming. I think Apollo could have done some crazy things, but they didn't modernize fast enough. And I think like in general, I'm super, super excited about building things with teams in a way that really feels bespoke and special and makes people excited. If you want to jam on go-to-market stuff, feel free to reach out. Super excited to continue being in this space. And thanks, Jai. So it always comes down to pricing and what I think is best. For like a lot of stuff, I'm powering for Antimetal in Clay, and this was pre their pricing change. So we're doing new hires, outages, that stuff, or new hires, promotions, like some job postings. we're using Phantom Buster for a few things for like real-time LinkedIn data. And then we're also running some just like recurring web scraping bots for things like outages on target account lists. So it depends, of course, on like what is easiest, what is most scalable. And I think as I see potentially like, as I explore new engagements with new clients in the future, it is really interesting for me to see how I can begin to move more of my workflows off of Clay, given how much I'm doing with custom API calls and stuff like that.
Cool. Anyone else